The calendar killer carefully plans to hurt his victims with a twisted mind. Karla is his next obsession. Will she survive his wrath or become the latest addition to his gruesome calendar of death? The clock is ticking and time is running out. The film opens with Klara unconscious in a basement, a thread on the wall with a death date and photo of her and her husband, smeared in blood. After this, news is reported about the calendar killer who murders victims on dates he's previously announced, often writing their names and death dates in blood on walls, glass, or somewhere. The scene then shifts to Jules, who is shown to be working from home for a helpline that operates between 8 p.m. and 2 a.m. Jules feels like someone is present in his home. He gets up to check, but finds no one. Meanwhile, another call comes in on his laptop. This call is from Caro, who is at the Mexico Platz bus stop. There are 5 men across the road from her, staring at her in a way that makes her fearful. Since the bus is about to arrive, Jules tries to reassure Caro and keep her calm. He advises her to ignore the men and focus on the bus. As the men approach her, Jules tells her to hit the hood of the car. Caro does so, and the men run away. The bus arrives, and Caro safely boards it. Later, a news update on the calendar killer mentions that the killer's handwriting can identify him. Jules becomes agitated, turns off the TV. Jules then gets up and quietly enters his daughter Fabiana's room, where she's sleeping. He gently kisses her forehead and returns to his room. He answers another call, introducing himself as consultant of Wake Me Home helpline. However, all he hears is heavy breathing on the other end. Jules tries hard to get a response, and finally he hears a woman's voice on the other end, breathing heavily and seemingly distressed. She asks Jules why he called her, unaware that she was the one who actually initiated the call. The woman acts as if she doesn't need any help. As a helpline consultant, Jules advises her not to hang up, sensing that she's in trouble. The woman, still breathing rapidly, repeatedly responds that it's too late for any help. Jules asks her why she thinks it's too late for help and what's wrong. In response, the woman reveals a shocking and disturbing secret that she will be murdered tonight. Jules introduces himself to Klara Vernay, who's being targeted by a killer. As they talk, Jules checks on his daughter after hearing a creak in the house. Klara thinks talking to Jules is pointless, as it's too late. Jules continues searching his house, as if he's also sensing someone's presence. However, there's no one except his daughter. While walking alone on a dark road, Klara reveals another shocking truth, that the calendar killer is the one who wants to kill her. As always, he wrote on the wall, along with a blood-stained photo of her and her husband, that one of them will be murdered on December 6th. A photo of Klara and her husband appears on a table, along with a photo of the threat written by the calendar clock killer on the wall. Additionally, there are photos of the serial killer's previous murders. A man is seen picking up these photos, but his intentions are unclear. Who is he? Is he the calendar killer or someone else? On the other hand, Jules suggests Klara inform the police, but she reveals no one believes her, including her husband, who thinks it's her imagination and laughs at her. Jules feels sympathy for Klara and wonders what's so funny about this situation. Afterwards, Klara appears to be retrieving something, from which Jules senses that she is in the garage. I'm surprised at how sharp Jules's senses are. As he gets himself a juice, he asks Klara what she's doing, but she doesn't respond. Suddenly, blood starts dripping from Jules's nose into the glass. Then Jules tells Klara to wait and quickly grabs a tissue from his bag, puts it up his nose to stop the bleeding, and sits down on a chair. Meanwhile, the man who saw the photos is searching for Klara at 27 Renata Street. Jules asks Klara about her situation at home. During their conversation, Klara discovers that the call is being recorded, and if she's murdered tonight, at least the call will be proof of her words. Jules gains Klara's trust, and she opens up about her husband's abuse, saying she feels like shedding her skin to stop burning up inside her. Klara recalls her wedding anniversary dinner with Martin at Zen restaurant. Her friend's arrival disturbs Martin, a narrow-minded person who controls Klara's actions. Martin orders seafood, which Klara dislikes. When Klara looks at her plate, she sees live prawns and a cockroach crawling onto her hand, triggering an allergic reaction. She knocks over a glass, shattering it. Everyone stares at Klara. Upon re-examining her plate, she sees only normal cooked seafood, realizing it was just her imagination. Martin gets angry, accusing Klara of stopping her medication, and threatens to admit her to a clinic again, as he doesn't want their daughter Amelie to have a mother who is mentally unstable. Then Martin forcefully starts feeding Klara a prawn with a fork. Klara's expression clearly shows that she's eating reluctantly, only to please Martin, and it seems like she's about to vomit. After dinner, Martin takes Klara's phone from her in the elevator. Then he takes her to a club where a bold girl welcomes them to the VP night. Klara doesn't understand what VP night means. A woman hands Martin a brochure and walks away. Everyone at the party wears silver masks, and Martin puts one on too. People stare at Klara with wild gazes, and some men behave wildly with women at the club, making Klara feel uncomfortable. She wants to leave, but Martin persuades her to stay. Then she gets more shocked seeing something weird. A girl is wrapped in plastic like a doll, and a man chokes her. Martin reassures her that these women are paid for this, and the entrance fee is donated to a children's foundation. Just then, Klara faints. As Klara regains consciousness at the party, she finds herself bound to the rolling floor, her makeup smeared. Men wearing masks surround her, taunting her. Martin is among those cruel men. Klara cries out for help, but he turns a deaf ear. A man puts a plastic wrapper over her mouth, making it hard for Klara to breathe. Klara shares with Jules that her daughter is 6, and surprisingly, Jules reveals his daughter Fabiana is also 6. Jules notices Klara has closed the garage shutter and opened the car door, sparking his curiosity. Klara says she's going home, but Jules senses something is off. So he tries to stop Klara, but she insists, "Don't tell me what to do." Jules frantically tries to reason with her, mentioning Amelie, but Klara won't listen. Before Martin or the calendar killer can kill her, Klara wants to take her own life. She starts the car, having intentionally left the gas pipe on, filling the car with gas. Then Klara recalls the traumatic night at the club, where she was brutally exploited by those heartless men, including her own husband. A man attacks Klara, but Martin intervenes, stopping him because he doesn't want Klara to end up in the ER. Martin picks Klara up and hands her over to a woman who takes Klara to the powder room to give her painkillers. Klara sees her injuries in the mirror. As the woman goes to get the painkillers, Klara makes a run for it. Martin asks the woman about Klara. Meanwhile, Klara stumbles out of the club, her feet heavy, and starts running down the street. She looks back, seeing the masked men from the club chasing her. Panicked, Klara runs faster, but when she looks back again, there's no one there. Remembering the traumatic events, Klara leaves a voicemail for Vigo, recording a message for her daughter Amelie, saying how much she loves her and that she's innocent in all this. Jules tries to reach Klara but gets no answer. His father calls, and Jules asks him to call back tomorrow, citing an emergency. Jules' father is unaware of his helpline work. Jules shares Klara's situation, but his father's offer to help sparks anger due to their strained relationship. The conversation turns heated when his father mentions Diana, prompting Jules to hang up. His father calls back, and Jules shares Klara's name and address. On the other hand, Klara is unconscious in the car. She remembers when her daughter lovingly blew a kiss on her wounded mouth and hugged her. Klara regains consciousness and feels suffocated. She opens the car door and vomits. Later, Klara answers Jules's call and informs him that she is in a place where the calendar killer cannot find her. Klara is suspicious, wondering why Jules won't leave her alone. So Jules shares a story about a client whose husband was murdered. Jules is puzzled as to why women tolerate such abuse. Klara explains that women are often financially dependent and endure hardships for their children. This is the story of every woman. Jules mentions his daughter Fabienne and how her mother took her own life while being treated at Berger Hof for depression. Klara reveals that she is also a client at Berger Hof, suffering from dissociative disorder. Jules' wife Diana struggled with severe depression. Diana was found in the bathtub filled with blood, and she herself was covered in blood. Her daughter was crying out for her mother to open the door as the house was on fire. Diana dragged herself to the door and tried to unlock it, but died before she could open it, and the fire engulfed her. Jules was on duty at the Berlin Fire Department's call center when a man reported a fire and a child screaming. Initially, the man gave a wrong address in Harbari, but when asked again, he provided the correct address: 24 Prince Regent, which was Jules' own home. Hearing this, Jules rushes home and finds the area surrounded by security. He sees the bathtub filled with blood and 2 dead bodies: Diana's, with her burnt hand visible, and his son's. Jules is devastated. Diana had locked the children in their room to prevent them from seeing her dead in the bathtub. The younger child tried to escape, while Fabienne hid in the closet. She was later taken to the hospital, while her brother got caught in the fire while playing with leftovers of birthday candles. Jules shares a tragic story with Klara, becoming emotional. He pauses, noticing spilled water and a missing knife, and asks Klara to hold on. While Klara hears whispers in the house and investigates, finding the TV on, playing a disturbing video of herself. On the glass window, she sees a threatening message from the calendar killer. Frightened and enraged, Klara throws the TV. Meanwhile, Jules takes down the house's light bulbs, wraps them in a cloth to smash them, and then scatters the pieces in front of the door. Then, Jules addresses Klara. Klara, frightened, tells him that the killer is nearby and sends Jules a photo of the glass window. A car stops outside the cabin, and the same person who was checking on the photos gets out of the car. Klara is convinced that Martin is behind everything since he's the only one who knows about the cabin house. She thinks Martin is exploiting her weakness to make her sicker, so she'll be readmitted to the hospital. The main point is that December 6th is Klara and Martin's wedding anniversary. Klara panics as a man approaches her cabin, telling Jules the killer has arrived. The man enters through a slightly open shutter of the garage, and Klara hides, then hangs up on Jules. The man passes by Klara's hiding spot, but doesn't see her hidden under the kitchen cabinets. He searches the entire house for Klara and sees the threatening message on the glass window. Then he exits through the door and enters the corridor. Klara, who is downstairs, slowly opens the door and quietly escapes from the house. The man exits through the same door and looks outside, noticing Klara's footprints on the ground. Klara runs into the jungle, breathing heavily. Meanwhile, Jules receives a call from his father, who is standing in front of Lazen, saying Klara is not there. It turns out that the man is Jules's father. Meanwhile, Klara is exhausted from running but continues, with no network signal. She experiences terrifying flashbacks of the club. As she runs, she hears Martin's voice. She slips and rolls down a hill, while Jules leaves a voicemail for Klara to call him back. A short while later, a car passes by Klara, stops. A man dressed as Santa Claus gets out, approaches Klara, and checks on her. Klara initially fears him and tries to fight, but he calms her down, saying he's there to help. The man introduces himself as Hendrik and assists Klara in getting up. He then helps the injured Klara into his car. As Klara regains consciousness in Hendrik's car, she asks him to take her to the city, but he insists on taking her to the hospital since she's not well. When Klara's phone signals return, she receives Jules' missed calls and calls him back. Jules answers and warns Klara to be careful and not trust anyone that night. Meanwhile, Fabienne wakes up crying and calls out to her parents. Jules rushes to his daughter and checks on her, finding that she has a fever. He gives her medicine, and Klara asks Jules to sing to Fabienne. Then Klara sings a lullaby over the phone. With only an hour left until December 6th ends, Klara hangs up the call. Hendrik, having overheard their conversation, realizes the calendar killer is after Klara. Klara asks Hendrik for a cigarette and a lighter. As Hendrik reaches for the lighter, Klara notices a taser and asks him to stop the car. Hendrik stops the car to calm Klara down, but Martin appears, pulling Hendrik out of the car and brutally beating him. Klara tries to intervene, but Martin turns on her. Klara can't leave Hendrik to freeze in the snowfall, so she helps him up and puts him back in the car. Then she gets into Martin's car and drives away. Jules's father watches this entire scene from a distance. During the drive, Martin asks Klara unnecessary questions, and she shows him the photo of the calendar killer's threatening message on her phone. However, Martin seems unaffected, revealing that he had already informed the police about the message he found at home. Meanwhile, Jules senses someone's presence in the house again, gets up and grabs a knife from the knife box. In the car, Klara checks her phone to see if Vigo has messaged her. Martin tries to justify his behavior, but Klara doesn't agree. Then he stops the car, furious, and blames Klara for always provoking him. Klara complains about the perverted club, and Martin becomes even angrier, starting to strangle Klara in the car. Meanwhile, Jules searches the house and accidentally steps on the broken glass he had laid out for safety. He injures his foot, and blood starts flowing. After a brief pause, he continues searching and finds his daughter's room door open. Inside the room behind her daughter's bed, he discovers a battery-dead mobile phone. As Jules exits the room, someone attacks him from behind, stabbing his leg and fleeing. Jules, injured, chases after the attacker, slipping on the blood-covered floor. He reaches the balcony and sees a frightened boy standing on the edge. Soft-hearted Jules reaches out to help the boy who attacked him. Martin arrives home with Klara, threatening her. Jules' father also arrives, having followed them. Klara uses a taser to Martin's neck for self-defense, and Martin gets electrocuted. Klara locks the car and escapes. Jules is bandaging his wound. Klara enters her house, calls Vigo, and walks in, putting her feet on the broken glass Jules had laid out. She notices her laptop on the table and hears Jules' voice singing a lullaby. Klara rushes to Amelie's room and finds Jules sitting beside Amelie. Klara is shocked. Jules takes Klara outside the room to avoid disturbing Amelie. Another revelation is that the child is not Jules's daughter Fabienne, and she is Klara's daughter Amelie. Jules takes Klara to the bedroom where the calendar killer's threat is written. Klara realizes Jules is the killer. Jules shows Klara the cameras he installed throughout the house to monitor Martin's abusive behavior towards Klara. Klara tries to escape and grab a knife, but Jules overpowers her. Outside, Martin breaks the car window with a bottle and escapes. Jules ties Klara up, saying there are 10 minutes left, and either Klara or Martin will be the target. Martin, hiding inside, overhears their conversation and tries to attack Jules with a stick. However, Jules sees his reflection in the front door and dodges the attack. Then he ties Martin up as well. Jules' father approaches and finds Vigo's lifeless body with significant blood loss. He realizes that Vigo must have fallen from the edge. Jules gives Klara an ultimatum: choose who will die, Martin or her. Jules removes the tape from Klara's mouth, and she asks about Fabienne. Jules reveals that Fabienne died at the hospital. With only 3 minutes left, Jules offers Klara a choice: kill Martin, or he'll do it himself. Jules hands Klara a knife and pushes her towards Martin. A tearful Klara tries to reason with Jules, explaining that killing Martin won't bring Dajana back. Jules wants to help women like Klara who have suffered immensely in their lives. Klara gathers courage and approaches Martin to kill him. However, she instead stabs Jules in the foot. Jules screams out loud in pain. Klara runs away, but Jules removes the knife and, despite bleeding, chases after her. He catches up to Klara and grabs her back to Martin. Jules says they both deserve each other and he is ready to attack them with the knife. Suddenly, someone shoots Jules from behind, and he falls to the ground, dead. Klara sees that the killer is the same person who arrived at the cabin house, whom she had mistaken for the calendar killer. The shooter reveals himself as Jules' father, who recognized Jules' handwriting on the TV. Klara quickly frees herself and rushes to her daughter Amelie, embracing her lovingly. The scene shifts to a ceremony where people are praising Martin for enduring the nightmare. Martin announces a prize distribution, but instead, a voice message plays, exposing his true nature. The recording is from Klara's phone, which she used to check Vigo's message in the car. Police arrive and arrest Martin. In the end, Martin is sentenced to 5 years in jail. Klara finally finds freedom from Martin and starts a new life with her daughter Amelie. If you like this movie, then don't forget to subscribe the channel.